everyone to PopCultX episode 54. Once again, it is Gabriel and Danny, the co-host of your podcast here from a Gen X point of view.
Millennial?
I know.
Shame on you.
I'm confused in my old age. So we talk about pop culture from 40-something point of view. So we'll go ahead and get started. I have a few hot topics to talk about. So let's go ahead and get started. Danny, how are you doing? Anything new in the woods?
Doing good. I'm excited because I finally get to watch The Batman that was finally released on HBO Max. So I'll be spending 3 hours of my upcoming weekend watching that. So it got me excited.
Is it out already, or is it going?
It's out already.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's out already. So you can go rewatch it when you want.
Yeah, that's really good. You're going to really like it.
I hope so. I hope it brings as much excitement to me as the new teaser trailer that dropped, I think it was today, actually, for the Thor 4, Thor Love and Thunder. Now, that just looked like it's going to be a fun movie. Just a lot of stuff going on there, from, Thor trying to find inner peace and find himself, working out, getting back to where he once was, to seeing Tessa Thompson look fierce as she's sitting there looking bored in a conference room as the ruler of New Asgard, but she looks absolutely bored out of her mind. So I'm just curious to see where Taika Waititi takes the whole character arc, and it just looks really, really great to me.
Yeah, it looks great to me. Of course, Jane Foster, who's played by Natalie Portman, is Thor in it,
Thor.
Or a version of Thor. She looks badass. Like, she's obviously worked out, because everyone on Twitter is talking about her biceps in the pose. She looks really cool. She has a different version of the Thor helmet where it covers her face more, so you can't clearly see who it is. So it's kind of more of a traditional superhero where maybe her true identity is being hidden. And so maybe we won't know that it's Jane immediately, and then we'll find out that it's Jane in the movie.
We find out it's someone else completely.
Yeah, so that's awesome. She looks great. They did show a bit of, I think, Olympus, where Zeus is in the previews. So people are speculating that maybe Hercules, who is also a Marvel superhero character, might be being introduced into the MCU. There is a section of the trailer where Thor and I forget the character's name. What Gronk?
Borg, I think.
Gronk. Yeah, so Korg. Yeah. He's standing to the left of Thor, and there's a significant amount of space to the other side of Thor. So people are saying that it's either Hercules, that who else is it? There's a bunch of speculation of people who it could be. And that it was edited out. It could be just Jane Foster as Thor, that they edited out, that they don't want to do any spoilers. So a lot of excitement in regards to it. It does look great. It has the same vibe as a previous Thor movie. That it's going to be fun, upbeat, great soundtrack. Throwing back to the Gen X feels of movies lately that have that great 90s. I think maybe it might even be 80s Guns N' Roses.
Those Guns N' Roses.
That in junior high. So I don't remember. It's late 80s, maybe even early 90s. But definitely our generation of music, and so I'm really excited about that. They obviously have Nirvana in the Batman, which you'll be watching soon. So it definitely is popular right now. I'm really excited. There was a bit of controversy that I was kind of curious to see what your point of view is, because the director, which I can't say his name,
Taika Waititi.
He was the director of what's the name of the movie? I think it's Jojo Bunny or Jojo
Rabbit.
Jojo Rabbit. And people
great movie, by the way.
Well, here's the thing: is that I thought, up until today, that it was well received by critics and by fans, and everyone thought it was hilarious. But apparently on Twitter, people are now turning on him as a director because they're saying that they made Hitler a sympathetic character, and that it's anti-Semitic, and we didn't need a movie that made Hitler look good. And I didn't get that from the movie at all.
Did they
it's
watch
like
a different movie? I don't get
like
it. 'Cause-
and he is also Jewish.
right.
So I don't know how to make sense of people's
That's.
frustration with
I mean,
it. It makes my head hurt.
it does. I mean, that for anything, he made him look like a buffoonish caricature of a person, and that's
Yeah.
how I received it, and that's how I saw it. And yeah, he was the comedic element to the movie, but he was also the imaginary character in the main kid actor's head. So it wasn't. Yeah, people just want to complain about anything. I don't know.
I mean, half of the movie, right? He's trying to kill the female Jewish character in it. Like he joked, like it's like the running joke that he's like. Then he falls in love with her, but I mean, it's definitely like dark humor, right? Like a little Nazi kid, and like his little buffoon best friend that's like also a Nazi, like, and I mean, but I think he did it in a good way that it's like it wasn't mocking the Holocaust. It wasn't mocking
Not at all.
Jewish people's experience, but it was like, what would it look like from a little boy's point of view that like does look up to Hitler, but has an imagination and comes across a Jewish person and then starts to see them as a human being. How does their outlook change?
Exactly.
And so I don't know. It was really weird.
And he does a really good job of telling that, from being a brainwashed Nazi kid to realizing that the Jewish people aren't monsters like he's been told his whole life, that they're actually people, and he sees them as such. Yeah, and it's a fantastic movie. People are just dumb.
The other outrage that I saw recently is that Danny Elfman was in the news, and I'll go into why he was in the news, but Danny Elfman and Oingo Boingo, his band in the 80s, have a song called Little Girls. And someone on Twitter was reminding people, like, don't forget that he did this really problematic song. And from my understanding is that song and the album was written from a point of view of like different people. And I watched the video, and he's definitely portraying himself as a monster and, as a pedophile. And it's not, he's portraying himself as like a villain. And so I'm like, it's not a song glorifying that. He's singing from like a creepy way. It's sort of the way Police had Murder by Numbers. Like, they're not actual serial killers, but they're singing from that point of view. Or to make a more modern reference for those of us that aren't Gen X, like Billie Eilish, I think, did a record where she's saying from different perspectives, one being a killer. She's not literally a killer. So like years from now, I don't think we're going to look back and say like, oh, Billie Eilish was problematic because she wrote a song where, she's talking about killing people. Like, it's satire. So I was like, and then the person who drew, that conclusion of him being problematic was like, well, I didn't do any research. I've heard that it's satire, so maybe it is satire. I'm like, wait, but you're accusing him of doing something really horrible, and you haven't even like looked into it yet. Like,
right.
And so I think that they were doing it, obviously, just like everyone online, for attention and because Danny Elfman has a Danny Elfman experience at Coachella. So he's sort of, in pop culture right now. So in order to get some of that spotlight, this person made that comment. So which brings me to this next topic of Coachella that Danny Elfman experiences at. So I was thinking, I had a little bit of a like FOMO, like fear of missing out, if you will, with all these cool concert, attendees and it being such like a big event. And then I realized, okay, like I really do not want to be there. I wouldn't, have fun. The crowd is crazy. And at my age, and it really came down to like one thing, and because it's like a full on like week event, right? Like you're there for a while.
Yeah.
Like me being in like mid 40s, like I'm too old to have to shit in a porta potty. Like that's something that I don't want to have to do again in my life. So I avoid all events or occasions where that might have to occur. festivals being one of them. Maybe when I was in my 20s and free spirited, I could care less. But being hot and having to use the same porta potty as hundreds of thousands of other people is not on my list of things that I want to do at this age. So
I completely understand that sentiment. Yeah, it's not. I just don't like crowds, but that would be the icing on the cake, I guess, so to speak.
It's the cherry on top of our Gen X old man gripes. It's like clouds, heat, porta potties, like the obnoxious influencers posting about their, festival attire, which is like stupid that that's even a thing now. Like you look up clothes and it's like, oh, it's a festival shirt. What? How? Like, what makes it a festival shirt versus a regular t-shirt? So I'm just like so not that age where I can go to a Coachella like event. I think probably the last one that I went to of like a festival like that was a Street Scene in San Diego when they used to do that. And I think it was Flaming Lips that was headlining Street Scene at the time. And it was in the parking lot, I think, of Qualcomm. And that was the last time. And it wasn't that crowded. And it was like a couple hours. It wasn't like a camping out, having to use a porta potty type event. So
I think at our age, we're more apt to go to like a Burning Man than a Coachella type thing. I don't know. I've never been to either. So
when it's like at my age, like I have an okay job. Like I own a house. I have a 401k. Like I just don't need to be like pooping in porta potties anymore. Like that's just like I've outgrown that phase of my life. I don't need to buy festival attire. I don't need to be getting kicked in the back of the head because someone thinks that it's appropriate to mosh when like Billie Eilish is playing and it's totally not the right thing to do. And that's one of the things that annoys me too, is that people who are young don't know what the appropriate time is to like slam dance or mosh. Like they do it for like any song and it's not appropriate for every artist or every type of song. So I'm happy with going to intimate, small gatherings of people.
I hear you.
I'm actually going. I all of this babbling on that I'm saying about not going, and I think I'm actually going to a festival around the 15th of May. But it's specifically for like our generation. It's like a whole bunch of like Morrissey is going to be there.
Oh, wow.
Like these old like new wave bands, like old bands from the 80s. So like it's going to be, there'll be chairs there. I think like they'll be appropriate for our age.
It's 50-50 chance that Morrissey will show up, right?
I think it's like a 9% chance that he's going to show up. But there are other cool people playing. I can't think of off the top of my head who else is going to be there, but it's a whole, like it's a good lineup, even if Morrissey wasn't going to be there. So if he doesn't show up, I'll still be happy. But I he's definitely like a bucket list. If I ever get a chance to see Morrissey at least once, I'll be satisfied. I know some people hate him now, but I listened to him growing up, so I want to see him at least once.
Yeah.
Before he goes on or passes on or whatever you want to call it.
That's cool. Yeah, I don't know.
Speaking of activities, one of the things that I've been really busy with is a lot of photo shoots. I've been a man on a mission lately of really trying to get out there and shoot since the pandemic is like, I wouldn't say it's winding down, but it's definitely kind of has a little bit more sense of normalcy. Like people can go out. Like we're not like stuck behind doors and, talk to people. We can take our mask off in public. So I've taken the opportunity to try to get as many photo shoots scheduled as possible.
Nice.
And so I thought, like, why not take the time to talk about photography on our podcast? Because I think we might have briefly mentioned in one of our previous podcasts of like who we would want to shoot, but maybe not necessarily like what type of photography we like who are some of our heroes, why we're photographers, like what about it do we enjoy, maybe like some ways that photography has infiltrated pop culture. So why don't we go and start by me asking or posing this question to you is why do you like taking pictures?
Well, okay. Hi, my name is Daniel. I'm a fashion photographer.
Photographer's Anonymous.
Yes. um, well, why I like taking pictures. I mean, I've always been fascinated with capturing images.
Mhm.
And it started out with me really enjoying um, film directing, really. And I've always wanted to be a film director, wanted to go to film school. But life as it is, I was given the chance just to capture one movie, an image at a time. So that's how I approach my photography. Is I like to think that I'm telling a story one image at a time. Um, so I do like to do a lot of portrait photography, wedding photography. It's there. It's good to pay the bills with, but
Right.
you know, a lot of fashion photography. I think fashion photography is where you get to be the most avant-garde and creative, especially if you're working with a great team. And for me, that's what it's all about: is setting up a great team, meaning you have a great designer, great makeup artist, great hairstylist, great models, great fashion garments that you're capturing. And I was really influenced into fashion photography by some of my inspirations, like Herb Ritz, Irving Penn, Richard Avedon, Mario Testino, is that his name?
Mhm.
And then of course Annie Leibovitz. And those are people who I really look up to, and I really love their style and just how they bring their vision to life. And for me, that's what it's all about. And I always like to joke that I I take a picture of what the light is telling me, because
Mhm.
whether it be outdoors and natural light or me controlling the light, it's going to be, photography is the capture of light. So I like to always think that I'm capturing whatever the light is telling me, where the light is showing on the scene. And it's just, that's just how my aesthetic and my eye goes.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's about it for my photography. Haven't done as much recently that I would like to. I'm starting to get back into it. It's always it's fun putting together photo shoots, but it's also a hassle at times because there's a
Mhm.
lot
It's
of
hard.
moving pieces that you
Yeah.
need to coordinate, that you need to make sure all schedules align, especially when people are just doing it for a creative outlet where no one's really financially benefiting from it. So it's just people donating their time in a way to
Mhm.
make someone's vision come true, whether it be my vision as the photographer or the fashion designer's vision come true, or the makeup artist, whoever has like the compelling reason for us to get together, and then we all work together to make that vision come true.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I really enjoy it. I really need to do more of it. I really need to share a lot of my work that I have in my archives that I know is just sitting there and collecting dust or data dust. I don't know. I
Yeah.
watched a movie, Kodachrome, on Netflix with Jason Sudeikis, Ed Harris, and Elizabeth Olsen. Is that her name? Yeah, Elizabeth Olsen.
Mhm.
And it was a fascinating movie because Ed Harris plays a photographer in his twilight years, and he only shot on Kodachrome film. And then it's the story of the last Kodachrome being processed in Kansas, and Jason Sudeikis and Ed Harris play father and son, but there are rifts between them. So they go on a journey to it to get that film processed. And one of the questions that Jason Sudeikis asked Harris is, "How come you don't shoot digital? Why only film?" And then he said, "Because in 50 some odd years, I want people to be able to feel my work still, and not just be ones and zeros on a hard drive somewhere." And I thought
Yeah.
that was very interesting, very interesting thought, because we think of um, a photography as, we everyone has it nowadays. Everyone has a camera, whether it be on their phone, whether it be a point and shoot or something. The proliferation of photography devices is way out there, right?
Mhm.
But for those people who still shoot film and actually have to develop and print out their work for it to be seen, I don't want to call them elitists or snobs, but it is a true art form there into itself on that.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, there's definitely different aspects and levels of being a
mhm,
photographer that you have. Like the person that I think that I admire most is people who have a unique and creative
yeah,
perspective on
hmm
photographs. Then you have people that are also really great technicians that
Yeah.
sometimes all they can really, sometimes the highest level that they get is to be an assistant to someone else because they know all the
The
technical
tech part
aspects
of
of
it.
it.
Yeah.
And they're never going to really be known as the artist because they don't really have a unique artistic point of view.
Right.
And then you have people who are, the unique 1% that have all the talent, that are like the technical, that are the artistic, that are like the creative, that are all wrapped up in one, that become like the genius level photographers. Um, I think for me, the thing that most appeals to me as photography is sort of trying to capture a moment
Yeah.
and make it, eternal, make it so that you can always go back and revisit it. I personally don't have a preference if it's physically held or if it's viewable on a screen. I think it's presumptuous of that character in the movie to think that we're going to have hands 50 years from now to even be able to touch the print. For all we know, we could just be a brain like floating in a jar of like liquid, which I hope, because then maybe we can live forever and we won't die. But so yeah, that's what appeals to me, is like saving a moment. Initially, when I started photography, I was a really big fan of fashion photography. Like I loved
Mm-hmm.
Patrick DeMarchelier, I loved Helmut Newton, I loved Herb Ritz, like you mentioned earlier. And now that I am evolving as a photographer, I tend to focus less on what people are wearing, and even ask people to undress, to have as minimal amount of clothing, so that it becomes less about what they're wearing and more about what they're saying with
Mm-hmm.
their
Mm-hmm.
body and with their face and their eyes. Um, because I think that regular fashion, like, clothes that me and you have access to, is really boring to me. Obviously, like, the most creative artistic designs are still amazing. They're pieces of artwork, but I don't have access to those. I don't have,
Right.
a
Right. Yeah.
French, designer that's shipping me, couture to photograph. So it's almost like if I can't shoot that high level of fashion, then I want to kind of remove the fashion from the equation,
That's a good point.
because it's sort of like, a cheap rendering of, like if you get some fast fashion from H&M, yeah, you could make it sort of cool, but it's gonna, at the end of the day, really kind of be kind of cheap looking.
Mm-hmm.
And so I find myself not focusing on what people are wearing, like, and trying not to plan as much as possible. Like, just show up. Like, I'm going to give you as little information as possible because I want to vibe off of the person.
Yeah.
Because, if I tell them show up wearing goth clothes and that's not their personality, the picture is going to seem really inauthentic. And so I don't want to project what I want on someone else. And so I have to kind of see them and meet them and start to shoot with them and vibe with them and see how they move, and go from there and let it be more of a natural progression. And
Yeah.
then, like, at the end of the shoot, have hopefully a good image. But I try to do as little planning as possible outside of location. I think locations are key because you want to have some
Mm-hmm.
place that the person's going to be comfortable. It's going to be conducive to shooting, and it's going to have good lighting and things like that. But I try not to force someone into something unless it's completely fantasy and it's completely.
Sorry, could you say that again?
My watch is tripping out. Unless it's completely
Fantasy
fantasy.
is the key word.
Yeah, or something that is commercial, like you are getting, a T-shirt from a T-shirt manufacturer, and you're being paid to take a picture of
Yeah.
that particular shirt. Then obviously you're going to plan for that. But that's kind of
So
where I'm
you
at
don't.
right now. I've been watching a lot of documentaries on street photographers.
Oh, okay.
There's a really good documentary on YouTube available for free. And I want to say that it's called like street photography, or so, I mean, if you just Google street photography documentary, it'll come up, and it has one of my favorite photographers, Mary Ellen Mark, who has passed. She's no longer alive, but one of my favorite photographers has done some great documentary photography. Has traveled the world and shot everyone, uh, and there is an authenticity to these photographers that just come across someone on the street.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them have an interaction with people and develop like a really quick, fast relationship and take a really, great picture. Some of them literally, I think it's Bruce Gilden, who's famously like has a flash, runs up to people, shoots their face. And I'm not a fan of that. I know some
No.
people are. Like, he obviously has a prolific career. Um, I think that it's, especially in this day and age where people are so guarded of their image because our images are everywhere, it makes
Mm-hmm.
it difficult for photographers to shoot on the street. So I
Yeah.
think now you're forced, like, you have to develop a relationship, because if you walk up to some girl on the Las Vegas Strip and don't ask and you just take her picture, she might slap you. Her boyfriend or her husband might come up to
Mm-hmm.
you and ask you what the hell you're doing. Um, and so you have to be really careful. So it's interesting because, like you said, photography and cameras have proliferated to the point that everyone is a model, everyone's a
Yeah.
photographer, everyone is the subject of photography and a critic of photography. But it's made people a lot more guarded and
Mm-hmm.
more protective of their image. Whereas before, it was, I think there was a bit of charm for having someone to ask you to have them take your picture.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it
Mm-hmm.
was like a compliment. Like, if someone in the 50s asked, oh, can I take your picture? It was like, oh wow, you want to take a picture of me? And people
Right.
would really do it. And now it's like, well, why do you want to take my picture? What are you going to use it for? What do you?
Exactly.
And it's kind of, it's an interesting um you know time that we're living in. But I find that it is still interesting because we have to document this time and day and age, because we are rapidly changing, and it is
Mm-hmm.
we are in a rapidly changing society. So I think that those street photographers have a lot of skill that
Yeah.
I like kind of getting back into.
I wonder
I'm
how.
a really big person on like going out and asking people to take their picture.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to actually do that tomorrow. I have the day
Oh,
off. So I
cool.
want to plan on going into a neighborhood like North Park or Hillcrest here in San Diego, where like cool people are, that I think would be open, or at least understand why I would want to take their picture.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they put time and effort into looking kind of creative or unique. So if I ask them, they would probably know why, versus going downtown and like seeing a lawyer and be like, can I take your picture? Well, why? Like, why do you want to take my picture? So I'll share that on our next podcast and see if
Oh, cool.
I
Yeah.
show up with a black eye. Maybe that's why I asked the wrong person.
Like, I wonder how the famous street photographer, I think his name Bill Cunningham in New
Mhm.
York City, how he would fare in today's society, because he always shot people on the streets of New York City, and they showed
Yeah.
up in the fashion trends. He was kind of like the start of fashion trends based upon what he shot there. So I just wonder
Yeah.
how he would fare.
I think that if he were a young man today and he was starting today, he would have a lot of challenges, because he started, obviously he was an older man. So he
Mm-hmm.
started off in that beginning age of photography where,
Yeah.
it was a compliment.
Yeah.
He obviously, what he had working for him in the 80s and 90s is that he was extremely well known. People started to know him as
With his
the
members
street
only
photographer
blazer,
for
right?
fashion. Yeah, like, so he had his fame going for him. He was an older man, so he's a little less threatening than a young man would be
Mm-hmm.
to a woman that he's some young guy going and taking a picture. And so I think that it would be a really big challenge for a young guy today
Yeah.
to be in New York and taking pictures of young women in bathing suit tops or mini skirts, and that doesn't have the notoriety or the fame that he had. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be a challenge, but people do it. I have seen some great fashion people who document streetwear, but I think they do it in a different way. And I think that especially with the way that we perceive race relations in the United States, where people are aware of exploitation, and that it's made people more guarded, and it's also made people more respectful of communities
Mm-hmm.
that they're going into. So, like, a white person going into Harlem to take pictures of the way they dress, like, is it complimentary? Is it exploitive? Or is it like making fun of them? Is it so that they're a spectacle? So like you really have to evaluate where the
Yeah.
motivations for that photographer is. And in order for that audience to allow you inside their world, like you're going to have to do your work. You're going to have a relationship with them and have that conversation with them and say, this is why I want to take your picture. This is like, I'm an ally. Like I want to celebrate your beauty or your style versus, making it an exploitive type situation. So I think that's another thing that we as photographers have to go up against because people, I mean, people are more sophisticated when it comes to, knowing what their final image is going to be used for.
Yeah.
And they don't want to
That's
be
true.
at the end of a joke. They don't want to be mocked or stared at because they're exotic or they're different than the mainstream culture. So that's something that I think that we have to really pay attention to.
Right. No, I agree. I agree completely, and it's a challenge. I mean, I personally don't know if I could do it. I mean, that's just not my style. I mean, I like capturing people's portraits, and I love showing, like you said, people not being able to hide behind what they're wearing. So you're capturing more of who they are and their personality. But I'm just going up to some random people on the street. I don't know if I could do that. Maybe when I was younger, I could. I don't know. But now it's like, do I want to talk to different people all the time? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's a challenge. Like I'm definitely was like more of an introvert when I was younger. I think, I'm a little bit more outgoing and assertive now in like my older age, but it is very intimidating to walk up to a stranger and start to have a conversation and let them know like, hey, you want to take a picture? But I mean, it's great skill building. I mean, it is.
That's true.
Really doing what we do in a regular photo shoot, but very quickly.
Yeah.
Like getting people to disarm their, let
instant
their guard
rapport.
down.
Yeah.
And so it's in that sense, it's really exciting. And I think that there's a part of it that it's very unique the way people, prepare themselves to go out in public. And it's different than preparing for a photo shoot when they know ahead of time someone's going to take my picture. So I find that kind of interesting. So I would suggest to any of our listeners or watchers of our podcast to take a look at some of the famous street photographers and let us know what you think about street photography. Is it a dead genre of photography? Like, are we going to see that there are less and less street photographers as time goes by? Like, how would you feel if a photographer came to you on a street and asked you to take your picture? Or even more daring, how would you feel if you caught a photographer taking your picture without your consent? Would you be flattered? Would you be offended or feel like you've been violated? I've had people take pictures of me like at clubs that are, that are friends. So they've taken pictures of me and then shown me, and I'm like, oh, that was a cool picture. So I wasn't really aware of it, but if they were a stranger, I think that in certain settings I wouldn't mind. But obviously, like if I'm like in my front of my house, like gardening, and someone's taking a picture of me, I'd be like, are you doing that? I would pose that question to our listeners and to our viewers. Like, how do you feel about that? Like, are you open to being photographed by a stranger, or are you not open or keen to having a stranger take your picture? So let us know, make comments, message us, make comments on our YouTube page, because I am really interested in what everyone else has to say as from the opposite side of the camera as a subject.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. I'd be curious to see what people have to say on those, to the answers to those.
Yeah. Right on. So we kind of touch base on some of the photographers that you like. I'm curious of like, where did you find that? I mean, now digital, you can Google fashion photographer and like hundreds and thousands of pictures will come up. But we grew up in that time when, the internet didn't exist. I used to love like looking at my mom's magazines like Vogue or People magazine used to have a lot of like celebrity portraits in it. And I used to love looking at the pictures. But where did you get your photo inspiration from? Like, what are some of the things where you would find those pictures?
Well, like my main inspiration and main person that I've always looked up to would be Herb Ritts. He's like been always been my favorite, and mainly it came from like the videos, music videos that he directed, like the Janet Jackson video and the Chris Isaac video for Wicked Game, and those were just like the black and white and just the contrasting colors and just the way he was able to capture the people in there and tell their stories, and that's just really where what drew me in to his style, and what really influenced me, I think, in my work is the music videos from there. I mean, didn't really look at many fashion magazines growing up, still don't really. And like you said, Google has been a huge key nowadays to finding out sources of inspiration. Like for this, doing some research a little bit just for this topic, I found out who Horst P. Horst was and his images, or her, I think him, and they're fascinating. And it's just like, wow, the black and white, the contrast, the stunning of that is just amazing. But yeah, other than the music videos from Herb Ritts, those were my main source of inspiration.
Yeah, they're as like a little side trivia of Herb Ritts and the Chris Isaac video is famous supermodel Helena Christensen was the subject of the Chris Isaac video Wicked Game.
Right.
Beautiful, beautiful model, like top models. I didn't know that she was actually or is a photographer. She's studied photography for years now and is a very prolific, respected photographer in her own right. She's done
Oh,
a lot
wow.
of fashion, travel, and documentary photography. And to go back to Mary Ellen Mark, who's one of my favorite photographers, she actually was doing workshops that Helena would attend and
Oh,
learn
cool.
photography
Okay.
from her. Which I think was like amazing, and what like a once in a lifetime opportunity that was for her. And so I thought it was really interesting because I saw an interview with Mary Ellen Mark, Helena Christensen, and Mark Seliger interviewing them about some of their like images, where their inspiration is drawn, and um, I think that her being a model really brings an interesting kind of twist to being a photographer because she spent a lot, decades in front of the camera, being able to like emote, relate, communicate with the photographer through her body and her face. And so that's like a unique skill set that she's able to bring as a photographer to the models that she's shooting and actors and actresses that she's shooting. So I thought that was really cool. Another photographer that is famous that used to be a model is Ellen von Unwerth, who was a model turned photographer. And I think that it's not uncommon for people who sort of grow out of modeling to become photographers because I think it's a natural progression. And it's interesting to see then what type of style of photography that they do and how they treat models and how they treat subjects and how they relate to them.
But, well, it's all about finding the light, right?
Yeah.
So as a model, they're taught to, find the light because where the light's going to be hitting you, that's what's going to be, show up better in the photographs and whatnot. So yeah, I could see how that's an easily transition to the other side of the lens.
Yeah, absolutely. I lost my train of thought, but there was something else. No, it's all good. I think I just wanted to bring up that interview. It's on YouTube as well, and it's Mark Seliger interviewing Mary Ellen Mark and Helena Christensen. I recommend it because they talk about some of these iconic and famous photographs that Mary Ellen Mark did, and to hear in her own words, what she was thinking, how she related to the subjects, how she shot such subjects. She briefly talked about how she felt that she had an advantage as a woman photographer because people would welcome her into their homes. They trusted her taking pictures of their children. And I thought that was an interesting point because, I think people, especially with like the Me Too movement, with sexual harassment and assault and all that stuff, like people have now become less trusting of males in general. And so that was an interesting perspective that I thought that she brought up, that she admitted or highlighted the fact that as a female photographer, she had an advantage in certain circumstances where, people were more trusting of her. So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, that I was thinking about that. I know there's been fewer female fashion photographers, of course, in comparison throughout time to their male counterparts, which is a shame because, there are many talented female photographers out there. But what you just said about being an advantage of being female and being a little bit more trusted quicker, I guess, when it comes to certain scenarios is quite interesting. Like for me, going up to, say, I see a fascinating subject on the street and I want to take a picture, if I was doing street photography, that I'm going to get a little more ridicule, I think, as being a male than, say, the same photographer, a female, walks up and does the same thing. I think it's a little easier to let your guard down, I think. Which is interesting.
Yeah, it poses an obstacle in our path that's not that's not insurmountable, but certainly it's something that we have to work against. Like, especially photographing a model that we don't personally know, and to be able to let them know we're not a creeper within the first 5 minutes.
Right.
Because there are so many guys with cameras
that's creeps, the problem.
And make photography, give photographers a bad name that are there for, their own personal titillation. And it pisses me off because it ruins it for the rest of us. It makes it that much harder. And, have them go find something else, go do something else, because it's horrible. I hate it. It pisses me off.
I agree. I completely agree. Yeah.
So anyway, with that, I think that we've come to the end of another podcast with PopCultX, episode 54, if you will. Still working on getting some great guests moving forward. Have a couple things in the works. So please stay tuned, subscribe, leave comments, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Stay safe, everyone.